For the month of September, I challenged myself to only paint in gouache in my sketchbook. This was a very fun month for me, and I'm really glad that I set this challenge for myself because I really want to practice painting in gouache. I love it. I think it's a great medium. So let's get into my September sketchbook tour. So this is the first spread of the month. So starting straight off the bat with landscapes. This first landscape was a full moon landscape for an art challenge. So this is for the Aloha Watercolors September challenge. And the prompt for the month was orange. So you're able to pair one color with orange to paint your piece. So this is a full moon landscape. I love the dark tree silhouettes and I really like the blend in the background. And then I painted this kind of, I don't know, sunset or dusk mountain landscape. I love painting moons in gouache in this style, so laying water down and then dropping white gouache in. I think it gives it a really lovely effect for moons. And as usual, I've timed how long these paintings took me, so I think I spent a bit more time on some of these paintings this month because of just the nature of gouache. This is probably one of my favorite spreads of the month. So here we have a snowy mountain landscape, again with a very watered down moon. I chose this reference photo because I really liked the shadow and wanted to challenge myself to play with shadow. I'm usually quite anxious of it and avoid those kind of reference photos. I've actually also uploaded a paint with me for this piece, so you can go over and check that out on my channel. And this next painting is a Kamehameha butterfly. Sorry if I've pronounced that incorrectly. It's a Hawaiian butterfly, and this was also for the Aloha Watercolors Challenge. I love this piece. I really love the shadow. I love that I was able to get the texture on the body of the butterfly. I was really trying to figure out how I would do that, so lots of layers in this area and I'm thrilled with how it turned out. Next we have what was meant to be a blood moon, but I lost track of myself and sure it's a moon, but it's definitely not our moon because I'm missing the crater. I found this a bit frustrating, a lot of back and forth, and I couldn't really figure out the right way to paint this. So it was a good exercise. I'm not thrilled with the result, but I'm glad that I did it. Next, this is my first painting of the month in acrylic gouache. So this is just a simple landscape with some hay bales off in the distance, so you know, trying to communicate size and distance and, you know, shadow as well, figuring out how to get these kind of textures without going line by line. These are all of the reasons why I want to practice gouache, because I'm used to doing things one way in watercolor, but with gouache you need to do them a little bit differently. This next page is some misty forest studies. So I was trying to figure out different ways to actually create mist in paintings when I'm using an opaque medium instead of watercolor. So in this first one, I just played around with different values. So, you know, adding lots of white to this layer and then increasing the amount of color that I've added. And then in this bottom landscape, I was actually blending the white. So all of these layers of trees are the same color, and I used white gouache and kind of just blended it up just to see what that effect would look like. So this is in gouache and this is the same principle, but in acrylic gouache. I'm not sure how I feel about this kind of technique, but I think it was definitely an interesting exercise. Next, I have a couple of galaxy studies. So I love to paint galaxies. If you're familiar with my work, you will know that. And of course, if I'm trying a new medium, the first thing that I want to figure out how to do is how to paint galaxies. So I used a kind of blending technique that I'm still working on. So I won't go in depth at the moment, you know, with how I did that. I'm still working on it and trying to figure out the best way to do it. I splattered too much paint on the piece when I was splattering stars, so there was a bit too much water on my brush without me realizing. So I tried to get rid of those, and now I've got, you know, these kind of meteors or comets. The next page is the same thing, but just in a different kind of order. So that's why, you know, they're the same colors, but they look a bit different just because of the order in which I've done that blending. So this was a good exercise. I'm really excited about building on this. Next spread is another of one of my favorites of the month. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. It's my favorite thing in the world. And for International Hobbit Day, I painted Bag End based on a reference photo that I took at Hobbiton a few years ago when I went to New Zealand. I've always wanted to paint Lord of the Rings pieces, and I've always felt intimidated by it because it's so important to me, and I put off doing it, you know, which I need to work on just giving things a shot. So this is why I'm really enjoying using a sketchbook, because this is just a safe space for me to experiment and do whatever I want. So I'm so happy with how this turned out. There were a couple of things I couldn't work out, so I left out the bells. There was a shadow I couldn't really figure out, but I had so much fun. And time definitely got away from me. I spent an hour and 50 minutes on this one. Next is a pink splash caladium. This again was a very fun piece, so a lot of laying down color and going back and forth blending. I'm thrilled with how this turned out. I really love the colors. Next I have another galaxy, so I painted this for Bi Visibility Day. So these are the colors of the Bi flag, again using the same process that I used earlier. All of these galaxies were painted with a student grade gouache, so the Arteza gouache, and with this one in particular I found myself having issues with the pigment lifting, which seems to be a common problem unique to the student gouache paints. I didn't really experience that with any other paints that I used this month. Next I painted this desert landscape, mainly because I saw a reference photo of a pink sunlight hitting the cactus, and I really wanted to paint that. So I've never painted a scene like this, and I'm happy with how it turned out. I feel like, you know, this seems a bit more illustrative. I could have worked on this one a bit more, but again, this is a sketchbook. This is all just practice and just having fun. I also used the Daniel Smith gouache paint for a couple of these pieces, so I've noted down, you know, the names of the brands that I've used, and I used 4 different gouache brands this month, and I'm thinking of doing a future video with a gouache brand comparison. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let me know. Next, I wanted to do a little bit of a mountain study. I love painting mountains, but I always find them intimidating, and I got a bit frustrated with this one. I spent quite a bit of time on this, and in the end I just kind of went over it with a wet brush and just smoothed things out. But the idea here was painting one painting with an undertone, an underpainting, and one without. So I've definitely learnt that you need to use a lot more paint for this scenario where you're using an underpainting, and that might be something that I also touch on in a future video. Next, I painted this piece of fruit, which I know what kind of fruit it is, but my partner asked me if it was a peach. It was meant to be a mandarin, but I couldn't figure out how to do the little dimples here, so it was very fun to paint, but I just couldn't figure it out. That's okay, I'll practice it again in the future. These next paintings are all with Winsor & Newton gouache, so I really enjoyed painting with Winsor & Newton this month actually. This again is one of my favourite spreads from the month. So this first piece is the Matterhorn. I spent a lot of time on this going back and forth, and it was a really good exercise in learning how to lay down shadows, midtones and highlights, because I need to do it one way in watercolor and it just wasn't working with gouache. So I'm so thrilled with this piece in the end. It's like everything just clicked in the final, 10 minutes of me painting. And I'm really excited to keep playing around with this technique and seeing what I can achieve. I do wish that I had made these clouds more peachy instead of magenta, but once I saw this final mountain, I knew I needed to just leave the page alone and not play with it anymore. Next, I painted these watermelons. Again, this was really, really fun for me. I am so happy with how this turned out. The rind was feeling a bit too yellow at one point, but it was a really good lesson in using undertones and then using white to build on top of that. So I'm so happy with how these turned out. I do think I put the highlights of the seeds on the wrong side. They weren't in the reference photo, so I just had to do it from memory. With the shadow here, I probably should have put the highlights on the other side, but that's fine. I love this painting. Second last painting was this sunflower. So I laid down an acrylic gouache shape and then I painted the sunflower inside. So yellow and purple are complementary colors, so that's why I went with a purple background. This was very fun. I find yellow shadows very difficult, so again, it's something that I'm working on, and this was a really good exercise. And my final painting for the month is actually the first page of the book, because I was too scared to paint that at the start, so I left it blank. So I love how this turned out. This is the door of Bag End, so again another Lord of the Rings painting, and specifically from The Hobbit when Gandalf carves the rune for the letter G in Bilbo's door before the dwarves arrive. Very fun. I'm so happy with how this turned out. I love the texture on the bricks, and it kind of looks like a sticker to me, like it's very illustrative, and I'm thrilled with how it turned out. So that is my sketchbook tour for the month. I know I've said this a few times, but I had so much fun this month, and I'm really excited to continue to play around with gouache, and now I can start my next sketchbook. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments or requests for future videos, please leave a comment below, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.